basically it differs between your exploration of an identity and your commitment to an
Mhm.
identity. Yeah, so it's James Marsh's identity status theory. And he says, come on. Okay, so he says that the first one is identity diffusion. So that's when like you haven't explored any real identity paths that you're interested in. You're kind of just like going with the flow. So you haven't committed to
Mhm.
anything. This is
Mhm.
this reminds me of myself when I'm like in between stages. Like when I first moved back to Buffalo from DC, and I just kind of like,
Mhm.
all right, I'm back. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the next
Yeah.
step is, but I'm just kind of hoping I find it.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so you don't know, you're not like exploring any possible identities for yourself, and you haven't committed to anything. The next
Mhm.
stage then is, well, not next stage. Another option is when you have high commitment to an identity, but you have low exploration. So you see this a lot in like, let's say a teenager is in a family that owns a business, and it's just always been that like this kid knows that he's
Mhm.
going to grow up to take over the business. He hasn't
That
really
makes sense, yeah.
explored any options, so he's kind of, this is called
Right.
identity foreclosure. So he's just like highly committed to this identity but hasn't really
Mhm.
explored it,
Yeah.
and kind of just like shuts off that part of him where it's like, does this
Yeah.
fit with who I want to be? um,
Right.
the identity moratorium is when there is high exploration. So you're kind of like trying on a bunch of different hats, but you're not
Mhm.
committed to any of them yet. You're just like kind of dipping your toe
Right.
into different possible identity paths. And I think
Right.
this is like something that's so natural for humans to go to, and it makes us feel so uncomfortable. Like we feel like we're
Right.
supposed to know, like, who am I and what do I want to do, instead of saying like, hey, I have
Preaching to the
all of
choir.
these, right? Like it's,
That's me.
and it's just like it's such a shameful thing for our society of like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm trying out these different things, like I'm gonna get experience here and here. Not saying that I want to commit to it, but there's identity achievement. And identity achievement basically is when you have high exploration, so you've explored all these different options and you found one and it just like fits, you're loving it, and you're going down
Mhm.
that path. And we have this idea that we land on identity achievement and that's it. We did the thing. But what the research is saying is like, no, we actually go through those four stages at all times. So even if, let's say, you like find your life path with your career and you're like, I
Mhm.
love psychology, I really want to
Mhm.
do research, I want to provide therapy, this is my thing. That's only like the career part of myself. Another aspect of my identity is like my family life. Who do I want to be like in that role?
Mhm.
I think in our society we kind of just like mush that into one ball of like, you have this one identity, this one role. You're a
Yeah.
psychologist, you're a mother. But in reality, we have
Yeah.
like all of these parts of us that are like
Yeah.
constantly shifting into this version that we have of ourselves. And that's not something
Mhm.
we ever talk about. And that's not something we're ever like, hey, let's sit down and figure out like, who do you actually want to be? Where it's just kind of
Yeah.
like, you're just supposed to know. You're supposed to know who
Yeah.
you are. And if you don't follow that, you're
Yeah.
a fake person. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that like
I
you,
resonate with that so much. Yeah.
yeah, you kind of like coined that. You're like, yeah, there's different stages, but I feel like it goes on longer. Yeah, no, it's supposed to be a lifelong process, and that's a good thing. We're supposed to
Yeah.
be developing like that.
Exactly, yeah, that's a great point, and then the thought of, like, a person who has, like, the business, the family business, like, I feel like that happens so much, or, like, kids start to resent their parents for
Yeah.
not letting them explore, or, like, not reaching those expectations. How like, when I think of this, and as far as, like, what we're talking about now and also, like, mental health
Mhm.
and mental illness, how much does, like, the nature versus nurture thing come into play?
Oh yeah. Oh man. It's so interrelated. The way I think of it is like the self that we were born into. And I know you had somebody
Mhm.
on who was talking about like astrology and stuff too. And I think that that's
Yeah,
very interesting because it kind of ties
yeah,
in where it's like, no matter
yeah,
what you believe, you're like born into a situation and you're born with like a deck of cards. You were given a deck of
right,
cards, and like which
mhm,
card you want to play is very much nurture and choice. So nature says you're born at this time in this place, and like you have these traits, these genetic dispositions, and
Mhm.
this fits really well into mental illness because it's like if you have a parent who has suffered from mental illness, we see a lot of uh, genetic
Mhm.
support that these things are passed
Mhm.
on. But you see a lot of cases where kids are growing up in like very dysfunctional households, and they don't develop a
Right.
mental illness. So they have the predisposition. They were born
Mhm.
with like a certain deck of cards, but the cards that they played or like the things that
Yeah.
happened to them on the path meant that mental illness did not emerge. At the same time,
Mhm.
somebody could not have a strong disposition to mental illness, but from the things that have happened to them and the way that, yeah, they were raised and taught to interact with the world, even if their parents don't have any mental illness, like that can still emerge in the kid. And it's like in developmental psychology, there are a few like crucial developmental stages. One of them being early childhood. So this is when like you're first learning about how to interact with the world. And I'm sure you see, oh my gosh, your son
Right.
is so precious. The cutest. I just like
Thank
every
you.
time I see pictures, I want a video of somebody squishing his cheeks every single. I'm like, he is just cute as a button. I can't.
Thank you. Oh, that makes me happy.
Oh my
Thank
gosh.
you.
But and like from seeing a lot of just like I don't know child psychology, like seeing a mother like you who just like cares so much and is so involved in like every step of his development. And like when you and Lynn were talking, it was just like
Mhm.
um, even if you felt like it was being like annoying or like when is it okay to ask questions, you were still there saying like, hey, is this normal? Like
Yeah, yeah,
so like
yeah,
that is so important because that's such a crucial area. This is when we see a lot of so like the first time you really are able to like interact with the world and understand how you fit
yeah.
into it.
Mhm.
And then equally, or like somebody like me says even more important is like adolescence, because adolescence is when you are um, once again learning how to interact with the world and learning how to fit into it. And it's also the first time you're able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, like for real. So it gives you this other, like, oh, how am I appearing to other people? Where do I fit in? Who likes me? Who doesn't? What do I like or not? Who am I?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
if somebody has had a great childhood, parents were there for everything, but something traumatic or just like it was a really difficult adolescent years, that can have just as detrimental an effect on somebody's like adult life and how they see
Mhm.
themselves interacting and fitting in with the world as early childhood. Um,
Mhm.
so I forget where this started. This is going to happen so many times, Kim. I'm just going to start talking
Oh,
psychology, and
no.
it's going to be
No.
it's going
I
to
do that,
end.
and I'm not talking psychology. I think I asked I don't even remember. I can't even remember.
Was this the one about nature versus nurture? So,
Yes, yes, yes.
like basically all of that to say like we're given a hand of cards and like things can change throughout our development that are totally outside of us and like
Mhm.
impact how we develop, but it really is this like interplay between nature and nurture that happens throughout our whole life. What are we predisposed to
Right.
experiencing, and based on the things that happen in our life, and this is called like the stress vulnerability model in
Mhm.
some conceptualization. So it's like, what am I vulnerable to? And what stresses have happened in my life that made certain things emerge or not emerge?
I feel like I learned about that and at some point. That's yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And like I know that you're more in the adolescent space and everything, but not you brought up my son and I am like so nervous and like what is the word? I feel a little overwhelmed with all of the
Oh,
things that are
yeah,
out there. Like,
for
as
sure.
far as I just feel like a lot of things are coming up or at least more accessible, like, with social media.
Hmm.
So I see, like, this is how you should respond to your child when they're doing this. Or, like, most recently, I saw, if a kid is, like, saying no to the dinner, and if you give them, like, attention when they're doing that, then they're gonna identify that as a time they get more attention, and it doesn't have to do with the food. So that's just an example, but I'm like,
Yeah,
"Oh my god, I feel like I need to know everything on every level." But, like, I'm hoping that what you say is, like, as long as you're giving, like, the love and trying, I feel like maybe that is the most important.
absolutely. And it's funny because I talk a lot with a therapist I work at the hospital, and she has,
Mhm.
I guess her new daughter is like 8 months old, something like that, and like she has a daughter who's a
Aw.
little bit older, and like she's such a skilled clinician and therapist. She's amazing. And she'll come into the office and be like worried about her mothering. And
Yeah.
we've like gone to basically saying that if somebody is that concerned about being a good mother, those are not the people who are coming into the office and we're saying, okay, this is like an issue that has to do with parenting.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
the parents who care, the parents who are like aware of what their kiddo is doing, like those are not the ones
Yeah.
who are playing a hand really in like mental illness development. And I think what you bring up right now, like I love examples like this because like for some mothers, maybe that is absolutely the truth that like
Mhm.
when their kid was not wanting food, they were just doing it for attention. That absolutely makes sense. That could be, but
Mhm.
that's one kid, and
Yeah.
if your son is getting enough attention otherwise, and like um, his function for saying I don't want to eat this might not be attention, and like only a
Mhm.
mother or only the other person who's in that interaction is going to know. So there really is, and
Right.
like you and Lynn were talking about this, I've talked about this a lot with Emily Pluniak, who my best friend still, who's just like such an incredible mother. It just like makes me so proud. It's
Aw,
amazing.
yeah, I
Oh
love
my god.
seeing that, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm just like, Emily, it's like it's such a breath of fresh air talking to her because I'm like,
Yeah.
you just are such a good mother, and like, and she just
Aw.
does not realize it, which is,
Yeah.
I think probably like a mother thing. But
Mhm.
what works for somebody else is not what's going to work for you, and that's just like across the board. So I think on one hand, it's
Right.
like so awesome that social media has allowed us to like talk about these things more openly, but everybody's case is their own case. So
Mhm.
seeing somebody else who like this is what they found out and this is what works for them, that's
Mhm.
just one kiddo, and it really can't be. It can give you ideas of like, okay, my
Mhm.
kiddo keeps on like didn't like saying that he's not going to eat, but I
Mhm.
know that he loves
Right.
corn. Why won't he eat his corn? Like then you could be
Right.
like, oh, maybe this he's doing this for like another reason, but I think
Right.
that's the downfall of it
Right.
too. It makes everybody question like, "Oh, am I interpreting this right? Am I supposed to know these things I don't know?" And the answer is no.
Yeah.
Everybody's experience is very specific to their own little one.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very important to remember, and I
Yeah.
have to remind myself of that. I just feel like there's so much information out there, and, like, that's just one reason I'm doing, like, the podcast. I just want all of the information. I have an issue. I'm like, if I don't know about something, I want to, or if I really resonate with something, I wanna know everything about it.
Yes.
So, yeah, that that helps. But kind of on that, like, topic of childhood and stuff, do you find like more of a place in your heart for criminals and people who do things in their adolescence and
Oh
adulthood?
yeah.
Like, because, yeah, like, how should we, like, I just feel like people always, I don't know how, I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, so I wouldn't know, but I feel like anybody who does something bad, it really does kind of like, go back to something, right? Or
Yeah.
is that not always the
Oh,
case?
I think almost always. And it's like it's
Mhm,
almost hard in the opposite direction because you're like when you can understand why somebody's done something just like horrific. Like you hear about somebody who's like, severely violated or like kind of like severely impacted somebody else's life by doing something that we just describe as evil. And then you get to
mhm,
know this person and you hear that not only are they just like, even if they don't show it on the outside, are they just like so full of shame and just remorse, but it's also you hear about the things that happened in their childhood and their adolescence where you're like, of course you don't know how to interact with like this aspect of the world. Of course, you think that
Yeah.
like this is an okay way to get the
Mhm.
affection that you're looking for. So